right, so we are recording now. So why don't you introduce yourself first,
Okay.
and then we
Um,
can get into the discussion of Wuxia
well,
in the game.
yeah. Well, my name's not too important. It's just Jim Alcala Sales, and I love Wuxia. Uh, I loved it before I knew there was a word for it. I loved it before there were streaming services that are fantastic today for tracking this down. Loved it before there were translations of books that I can now get my hands on. And for me, it was the thing that friends and family tolerated when I watched those poorly dubbed, terrible movies, which I would then go and try and make weapons and get hurt and try and do big leaps and get hurt and and yeah, so I decided that many years ago that I absolutely needed to make a game that would let me now, many, many, many decades later, role play at the table with friends the kinds of things that I saw in those movies as I was growing up.
Now, and the game, just before, because we're going to get into it, but the game is
Yeah.
called Art of Wuxia for people that are just listening to the podcast now. What you had said that you were watching the genre before you had a word for it, and that's very
Yeah.
familiar to me because I remember that experience as well. It was kind of all put under the category of kung fu,
Yeah.
of martial arts. I think sometimes we would call them the flying swordsman movies, is how we
Yep.
normally describe them.
Hmm.
But we really didn't know that word wuxia, and so I'm just curious, when did you enter into it? Like, what was your introduction to wuxia?
Uh, before I knew what it was called, it would have been the Shaw Brothers movies, of course.
Hmm.
Generally on Sunday afternoons, the local television show or station would carry them. I was growing up on a farm, so I would make sure I got everything done on, Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday morning, so I could catch this in the afternoon. And then, of course, go out and try and make a three-sectional staff out of whatever I had, and always a big mistake. But you're inspired by that kind of stuff. Um, and you've seen it just change so much over the years. I think back then they were just called kung fu movies,
Mm.
and now if I go to Amazon Prime or Netflix or Hulu and I look up wuxia, I see a large spectrum of things, including kung fu movies and the stuff of Xianxia and Zhenhuan, all the other kind of stuff. But for me, it's all wuxia, and then there's just varying spectrums and focuses of it. And I've had some really great long conversations with Dr. Albert Dali on this stuff, and you know, about the term and how it's used.
And
And
how do you like in the game and in your regular life? How do you like to use the term? You like to keep it broad, or you like to?
I find any time in my life when I've tried to narrow something down and pick a dogmatic view, life smacks me upside the head
Mm.
and says, "Yeah, you're not going to get anywhere with that." So it's a little broad. I've run using this rule set some straight up kung fu, multiple sects in a city,
Hmm.
uh, duking it out for who's the biggest and baddest, to some things that have had quite a bit of magic and
Hmm.
even some creatures, but not at the level where you know um, not at that level where people are knocking down mountains and
Okay.
castles and that kind of thing.
That Chad
So
Shah. Yeah, that gets
yeah,
to a very high level. Yeah, I'm like,
yeah,
where would you say your magical comfort zone is with this
my
stuff?
comfort zone is uh, my personal comfort zone is kind of the kind of things you'd see in Yuji, where there is some magic there, but you don't know for sure until it's revealed.
Okay.
But I'm also okay, and players love it when they can be duking it out, running on the walls and on the roof, and then someone throws a bunch of mystic swords.
Okay.
I'm okay with that. So I'm trying to think of some TV series like Ice Fantasy takes it a
Mhm.
little higher than I would game.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's but yeah.
Yeah. I only made it. I think I got through about 10 episodes of Ice Fantasy, so I don't know the whole series, but I know what you're talking about. Um, All right, so we had a little bit of a break there in the connectivity, so we're just going to continue where we left off, which was we were talking about Ice Fantasy, and I was saying to you that I only got about 10 episodes in, I think, but I understood what you meant by that, where that level of magic where you're getting to, I don't know what you would call it, but sort of the mountain destroying magic level that you were talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah. Well, this gets your question actually gets to one of the reasons of why I actually made this game is there's a lot of people that role play games,
Mm.
and what is the standard is your bog standard fantasy,
Yeah.
and so players are used to being able to throw some stuff around, and so I wanted to make sure that we could do that, and that's pretty well represented within the genre too, and you can describe it in many different ways. So yeah, I wanted to provide that to players so that they would. I want this game to get people interested in this storytelling style because I think
Okay.
it's just absolutely fantastic. So if we can keep it, uh, sure, I could have gone extremely narrow, to represent one type of this storytelling, but I didn't want to do that specifically because I want to reach more people.
Well, I think that's wise. I think it's also good because a lot of people are entering into this from different points, especially with the streaming stuff now. Because if someone's coming into it through Ice Fantasy or through these other things, it may be helpful for them to have something they can you know, hang on to that they recognize.
Right,
Maybe not quite that mountain level stuff, but
right.
something. Also, I do find you get a little bit of wiggle room because it's not always clear, and especially in the movie depictions, how much of this is magical and how much of this is just visual representation of a concept that they're trying to get to. Do you know what I mean? There's that.
100% agree. Yeah. And it depends on the translation, even, you know, when you're listening and what they're saying. And you can watch a movie from a couple different translators. And sometimes they're talking about chi abilities, sometimes they're talking about magic, sometimes they won't even say. It's just there's a
Yeah.
visual effect by industrial light magic, from way back.
Well, we both like Web of Death, and there's a
Yeah.
famous scene in there where, in one of the versions, they say the Lord's Prayer, and in the other
Yeah,
version, it's
exactly.
so
Exactly. And I do think that's key to appreciating and understanding wuxia is absorb as many different styles and kinds as you can so that you can find what you like, what you find gameable, and you expand, like anything, you expand your horizons. I mean, I think we have even interviewed and talked with some people who didn't really grow up with the Shaw Brothers
yeah,
stuff. And they're just like, well, it's so cheesy, it's so bad,
yeah,
but it's
yeah.
not.
The
If
Shaw
you
Brothers
know
is my
what they're doing.
favorite. That's
Yeah.
I think I think with that, what I found is it's about the staginess of it and the sets. That seems to be the big. I think because Shaw Brothers looks kind of like Golden Age of Hollywood style filmmaking. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
if you grew
My
up on
wife,
that, that's fine. But maybe for younger people that didn't, I don't know. Maybe it's harder for them to buy into it.
my wife and a couple of really hardcore wuxia friends, we try and pick where we've seen that particular railing or courtyard or street
Yeah,
in the different
yeah,
shows, and it's a lot of fun to do. Which brings me to something that we talked about before, is getting players to understand what this is about. You can say, well, it's a kung fu fantasy role playing game. Well, what's that? Well, do you like D&D? Do you like, your favorite fantasy genre? Well, we can take that stuff and add high flying kung fu. That's a doorway, nothing more. But I think getting your players to understand the tropes of the genre and using those tropes is really key. And when I was explaining this to one of my core players and play testers, he said, "Well, gee, it sounds like the tropes are so strong you could just about watch a movie and play bingo with them." So the next morning, I said, "Here are 18 bingo cards I whipped up,"
okay.
and we got together that night, and now we do it all the time where we play wuxia bingo, and I've actually brought them to there's a local cinema that they had like a touch of Zen, and they played a couple others along the way, and so I brought little short pencils and a Ziploc and the cards and handed them out, and people just had a great time.
I do find as people get more familiar with the genre, like it really starts to pay dividends with the what they do in the game starts to actually feel like a wuxia.
Oh,
You
totally.
know,
Yeah. So if you can get them to buy into those tropes and then they know what to watch for, they understand what they're seeing. And now this is where I think you start making lifelong fans of it because now they're interested to see how those tools and widgets are twisted and turned in the different stories.
yeah. No,
You get a good
oh, go ahead.
appreciation.
Now, I want to get into the game in a moment, but one thing I
Sure.
wanted to know is what is your like? Do you have a set of directors that are that you're particularly fond of, or actors
Um,
and actresses? Like, is there are
you
there
know, you I've come up with lists in the past, and then you get a director that it either hasn't done anything like it or hasn't
Mm.
done anything in decades, and suddenly comes out with just a smash of a
Yeah.
wonderful wuxia thing. Suhark, of course,
Mm.
right? Um, uh, I mean, everything from the Shaw Brothers. Some of it, yeah, it's not my cup of tea. I like anything set in ancient China or
Hmm.
with a slight fantasy bent.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
the more uh, if I'm going to watch more of the modern stuff, then I want to watch a John Woo, Chow Yun Fat Gun Fu type thing because
Okay.
I just think they're the for that type of thing. There's nothing better for me.
I
Um,
would agree. I would agree with that.
I also when streaming services became a thing, I took and I went back through the Hong Kong movie database. I'm sure you've
Mm.
seen that,
Yeah.
and I pulled pictures of all the people that we kept seeing, all the men and women who have brought these stories to life and made color pictures and put them on some sheets and laminated them, and then we would learn their names. I mean, many of these people, and it's just tragic to me, have passed on.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, time is gone. But then when we're, when suddenly you see Cheng Pei Pei in something later on, and Gordon Liu later
Yeah.
on, it's just mind-blowingly cool.
Well, they're actually really good examples for new players because if you show somebody come drink with me, they'll have that experience of they might have seen Crouching Tiger, and it'll slowly dawn on them who this woman is,
Yes.
and it's always interesting to watch that. And you get a similar thing with Gordon Liu. It's so those kinds of movies can
Yeah.
be very
And
useful for that.
didn't we have um who was it in the movie Wuxia, the kind of crime story told inside out. We had a couple of famous people that
Yeah,
had come
yeah.
up from the 60s and
Yeah, they had
70s.
Kara Hui played the
Yeah,
mother. They're not the mother, like the husband's uh, wife. I think he had a number of wives, and she has that fabulous rooftop scene with Donnie Yen,
yes.
and Jimmy Wang Yu plays
And
the
Jimmy Wang
grandfather.
Yu, yes,
Yeah,
the one-armed swordsman that just,
yeah,
yeah, there was a lot of noise. We had to stop the movie for a little bit to
yeah.
like calm down because it's just to see these people doing this with, I don't know if it's a revitalization, but with the modern wire work and special effects and stuff, when it's done right, it's just phenomenal.
And especially if you get someone like a Kara Hui who really knew how to do it. Like they come from that old school training ground. And one of the criticisms you see of some of the newer movies is sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes the actors aren't necessarily because it's just not as the training's different. Do you know what I mean? Like the
It
level of
is.
intensity is different.
It
So
is.
when you get those old school actors in a new movie, it can look really amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and as you've mentioned before on some of your shows, uh, watch the camera. If it's up close,
yeah,
it's not the same as when they pan back and you watch the whole thing.
yeah, yeah,
And luckily, we get people like Donnie Yen now, who are doing that again, and it's just, it brings it to a whole nother level. And more mainstream. I mean, we get things like, oh my gosh, seeing Jet Li and Jackie Chan together in Forbidden Kingdom.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I end up recommending that a lot to people as a entry family
You know
uh,
what's funny?
show.
I had a friend from China who I was talking with about wuxia, and that was one of his first recommendations to me, which surprised me. And so you know
It's legit.
yeah.
It's great. Cool.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so what about the game itself, the Art of
Okay.
Wuxia? Uh, what first off, what system does it use? Why don't we start there?
All
What's the
right.
basic system?
Okay. So this ended up being the third system that I worked with until I was happy.
Hmm.
And it's the D00 Light system by DWD Studios. They've used it for Bare Bones Fantasy, Covert Ops, and Frontier Space. And it's a percentile system, but not like any I've ever seen before. It's uh, things happen in multiples of five, tens, or 20s mostly. You really don't mess with small numbers,
Hmm.
so the action flows real well. Uh, so you're rolling under your skill to try and do things. But where it becomes interesting is you can take as many actions as you want on your turn. Every action after the first one, your score that you need to hit is 20 percentage points less.
Okay. Okay.
So if you're in a D20 system, I mean, it's the same as taking -5 on
Yeah.
everything. Now, here's where it gets interesting because we're rolling with two 10-sider dice, the ones that are, 1009. So our numbers are actually 00 to 99. Anything on a 5 below is always going to succeed, and anything on a 96 or above is always going to fail. But when doubles come up, something interesting happens. Those are criticals. So if you have a score of, let's say, 80%, and you roll a 66, that's a critical success. If you roll an 88, that's a critical failure.
Okay.
So now here's where you couple that in with the more actions you take, as you see, the higher chance that critical failure is going to kick in.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. And the other thing is that defenses are active. So if someone attacks you, you've got to make if it's you're going to have to make some kind of dex roll or logic roll,
Okay.
depending on the type of attack. But those also are at that multi-action penalty that you've been building up.
Okay. I can see how this would all work very well for the wuxia genre.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, when it finally clicked that I'd been playing the system for like some 8 months before I'd used two other systems to work on this project, and then it was like, wait a second, and yeah, and you do watch. I mean, you can see it right in the scenes where someone does a flurry of punches to someone else, and then the person's like, my turn.
Yeah.
And
That's
that
exactly what I'm
happens
picturing. That's
that
exactly.
happens organically in this game. And the other thing that is there's a tactical element too, because you're trying to pile on penalties on the enemy. You
Mhm.
know, uh, so you're going to suffer on your ability to defend yourself with a hard penalty for various reasons. Someone attacks you that you didn't know was there. Someone attacks you with ranged weapons or hidden weapons, or um, uh, you're ganged up on. So all those things can get you that hard penalty to your defense. So you're going to start with a penalty before you even start to take actions. So it suddenly organically the team doesn't just send the sneaky person to try and backstab someone. Instead, they fire arrows, or the warrior gets in his face, and then the person with that ultimate stealth roll goes, "It's my turn," and they're at what? Minus defense now? They can't actually defend against me. No, they cannot.
No, that's interesting. I do like I like that because it makes the number of actions you take a tactical choice, like you're saying,
Yeah,
and it absolutely reflects how the genre works.
yeah.
And
And
it
what you see is players' hands shaking as they pick up the dice because there's so much going on and it happens so fast. And you know, you see it all. The more they push, the higher the chances are for those crit fails to happen. And those can be pretty spectacular because they are situational. There's not a chart that you're going to roll on. We give guidance in the book on how to apply those crit fails and stuff and what to do with them. But it's never great. So yeah. But your group of players, it's actually a game that as players they can get better at over time as working as a group and figuring out how to do things. Like I said, real organically, it'll come out of, it's like, well, if I hide an attack, that's going to be better. Or if I use hidden weapons, that'll be better. And then, of course, there's counters to all those things too.
and so since you already have it sounds like the base is already pretty good. Do you know what I mean, in terms of reflecting martial arts? So then, how did you approach layering actual martial art mechanics on top of that?
Yeah. Well, Bill Logan, the publisher, he was the main. He was one of the authors on Covert Ops, and they had started to mess with some game mechanics with some martial arts maneuvers in there, and some of those were pretty cool. And so I started taking those, and the first thing I wanted to do is because I'd already kind of cobbled up a couple of rule sets already.
Mm-hmm.
When I say cobbled up, I mean like I had, Lulu printed, player tested documents, but wasn't quite there. There's a lot of ways to tweak this game engine, and there's a finite limit. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if I've reached it yet, but I'm sure close because there's just not a whole lot left that we can tweak the rules with. So since you have a fast, light system, What I could not do is come up with a whole ton of martial arts maneuvers.
Mm.
The other thing is I get constantly inspired by techniques and things that I see
Yeah.
in the movies and stuff, and I wanted the players to bring that same energy with them and be rewarded for it. So instead, what I did is I used the techniques to be more like names for how a game effect.
Okay.
Like a wrist lock could be done many different ways in the martial arts, in true real martial arts, but it's a wrist lock. So how is that defined is up to the player in the game and the game master if they want to work together. And what it's called, more importantly, that's completely up to the player.
Okay, I see. So it could the same thing could theoretically be many different styles depending upon.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that then gives the players narrative freedom to come up with what they want. We also then don't get bogged down into techniques that aren't doing something different.
Yeah.
As far as when someone's purchasing them. So there's a limited number, like I said, a limited number of ways of manipulating this game system, of which I think we've done a good job. And then, you on the technical aspect of game design, you start with your spreadsheets and your statistics, and you figure out how many of these techniques should be used more than once in the different styles, and then you work on coming up with different styles. And one of the things that I've heard, which has been really nice since people have started reporting and commenting on the game now that it's out there, is that there's a big list of kung fu styles and they all feel different, which is exactly what we're going for.
Okay. Okay.
And yet you can be sitting at dinner and think up of a new technique name and what it looks like, and then look and see if any of those techniques would match that you have, and then just use it at the game and be rewarded for it. There's an actual game mechanic in there that if you shout out the name of your technique when you're rolling, you get a bonus to using it.
I like
and
that.
You get one of those on your turn, so you might take 3-4 actions if you're a higher level character. But yeah, so you get rewarded for it. Again, we're trying to push the genre and get people to go for it.
That's a good way to do it, though, because that's the kind of way that gets people involved. It's not punitive. Do you know what I mean? It's
engaging.
Now what? Go ahead. Oh,
I was going to say, and it's pretty rare when the whole team, of players, everyone just goes, you need to come up with a different name. That just didn't really do it. That doesn't happen very often. Most of the time people are like, oh, that's so cool. And so people try and outdo each other with their cool names. So your characters aren't going to have huge handfuls of techniques. Mm-hmm. They're just going to be a few. So you'll have time to kind of think up what they look like and then what you want to call them and stuff.
Okay. No, that's good. I've even been moving away. I mean, obviously, complex series of techniques is fine with me, but I've been increasingly moving towards simpler styles of running games like this, because I feel like it can help you capture the feel of one of these movies with more ease if you're not as bogged down and
that was where I was at. I'm an older gamer. I have older gamers, and we are not into the crunch that we used to have. We would not be doing it this way, but we are. And since our game engine moves so fast, so does all the other stuff have to happen fast. So if there's a limited number but useful kinds of things that actually mechanically make a difference, that's what we wanted. So
it sounds very tight. That's how it sounds to me. It sounds like a very tight system.
I'm extremely happy with it. We play tested the heck out of this thing. I mean, I've worked on this for many years.
Yeah, I remember seeing the posts on it. I was like, is this thing even going to come out? Like, it seems like, because after a while, sometimes it just becomes like a pet project that person noodles at, but never actually releases. But I was glad to see that it actually came out, and that was because of play testing, which is the best reason to not release something right away.
Well, and I can say that I mean, I don't even know that streaming services were all that popular when I first started this, to tell you the truth. And there's certainly, I've watched you do a phenomenal job of really trying to bring the wuxia and role-playing games communities together with your work on MeWe and G Plus before then, and your
the G Plus was a big hit to the wuxia community. That going away was
I miss it so much.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's changed over time, but we were playing the heck out of it. Play
hmm,
testing, play testing, play testing. And because this was my own project and I'm not hired to do that, I could afford the time.
hmm.
And then when I was ready, then I approached DW and I said, remember that project I mentioned a long time ago? They're like, sure. I said, well, here you go. And they loved it. And Bill especially did a phenomenal job with his layout foo, I call it.
Yeah, the layout is very nice. I'm
Oh
very
man. And then the artist that we got, Eric Quigley, for the cover did a great job. And then we ended up with Daniel Garcia did the interior art and he nailed it.
and
He watched a lot of wuxia while he was doing it too, which
that's
is even
important.
better.
That's important. Yeah, I sometimes like I've sent DVDs to artists and stuff like
Oh,
that just
I
to
believe it.
yeah, it's well because you don't it's it's one of these things you want to get it right, you know. The now you had said you how many years do you think you were playtesting this for? Would you
Oh
guess?
boy. Um, I would say hardcore playtesting, probably, by the time I would say, riveted down the main components of it, I would
Mm-hmm.
say a good solid 4 years.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Now
yeah.
the reason I ask is because one thing I noticed is from the day that I put out my Wuxia game to like a year later,
Uh,
things had evolved so much online, like you said, with streaming services and
yes,
awareness of the genre. I'm
yes,
curious. Did you see a norm? Like, did that number one? Did it benefit you to see that evolution over the 4 years?
yes,
But is
yes.
it? Oh, go ahead.
Um, One was your work with the community. Again, I can't thank you enough for what you've done for people and fans of Wuxia. I mean, your openness to interview me, making another role-playing game, is there room for more Wuxia role-playing games? Well, there's a lot of stories to be told and different ways of telling them. I think so. You think so.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think the
you know,
more the better with this.
yeah,
I think we need
and
more
you'd said
people.
that early on, and I took that to heart. And well, a big thing with streaming services is now I can watch um, wuxia novels made into TV series. And here is where this is a game master and player treasure trove of
Yeah.
ideas. Here's where you get your villain and your character arcs and your long-term stories, and where you constantly get reminded that yes, dungeons are a part of this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There the, the television series are I think a really valuable tool.
Oh, they're
The
so good, and I find myself that's kind of all. I mean, I finished up Sword Dynasty a month and a half ago. Then my wife and I watched Handsome Siblings on Netflix. That was another, I don't know, 40, 50 episodes. And now we're watching Evernight, and it doesn't end. However, I have enough friends that love these, but have been tormented by sometimes horrible endings that now they wait until we finish
mhm.
before we recommend them. Because as you know, sometimes things happen and a story just has to stop.
the
And that can be brutal.
the first TV series like that I saw was Return of Condor Heroes, which number one is in the middle. It's the middle story,
Yes,
but number
yes.
two, I remember I sat down and I had never seen like a 50 episode series. I mean, I've seen like sitcoms that have 50 episodes and shows that you don't have to watch every episode that are that long, or maybe something like some ongoing series that I invested time in that got close to like 25 episodes.
Sure.
But I remember thinking, like, can this really be 50 episodes? And I didn't. It seemed daunting. But then you're 3 episodes in, and you can't stop.
Yep.
It just grips you.
Yeah.
Um,
And no commercials.
yes. Well, I was watching a lot of them on Viki, so I had to.
Oh,
I had to watch
okay.
a lot of the commercials there. But yeah, otherwise you can definitely avoid the commercials.
Yeah,
And
and Vicky has improved a lot now with a small fee now for a year. You're pretty much free of the commercial except right at the recap at the beginning. And
okay.
it's often 10 times as loud as the rest of the show.
Well, and it looks like these shows are becoming much more readily available, anyways, on the different platforms. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and so it makes it easier too when you can make a recommendation to some friends that may have never seen this before, and they're like, "Goodness, this is really good," and I've got some ideas for a character I want to play. Oh, do you? All right, bring it.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
even if you're not doing a Wuxia campaign, honestly, if you're playing D&D,
yeah,
even that it
yeah,
would benefit that kind of campaign too because of the material that's
absolutely,
in them. Um,
absolutely.
Now, what about chi? How did you address chi in this? Because there is a big section on that, and
Yeah. Um, Chi was one of those things that I think we had several different systems. I say we, it's me really,
hmm,
but that I'm talking about all the comments from playtesters and stuff too. That's all part of what goes into it. And we had some game mechanics that we wanted to use with it, and we knew that we wanted some abilities to be more specialized for those. I call them mystics in this game, but the people who meditate a lot.
yeah,
The ones who are in tune with the harmonies of the universe, more thing. Um, and then there is the great debate in martial arts of hard styles versus soft styles, internal versus external. And so at the end of the day, everything ends up being the same at the masters, you
yeah.
know. So that's the tack that we went is we provided chi abilities that anybody could use. And I even go into a little bit on NPCs and say, well, they have some latent chi, but they can't tap into it. And
Hmm.
if that ever gets disrupted, it can be very dangerous for them, and here's some things you can play with that. But yeah, there's things that everybody can do. This is I should to tie in with what you're asking about chi, this game uses a set of skills that are sort of, you could describe them as careers. They're
Hmm.
not really classes, and you mix and match them the way you want when you're
And
building your character.
and that's how you gain your skills, right? Your skills are
That's
set by that. Is that?
Yep. And so you just select those skills, like a skill is alchemist, or a
Hmm.
skill is diviner, or warrior. And then as you put levels into those different skills, you're building your character as you go along. And there's going to be chi that you can use even if you're
Hmm.
not a warrior. And then there's, depending on if you're a kung fu artist of a internal or external style, you're going to have different chi abilities that are available to you at first. But as you get higher and higher ranks, that'll cross over, and then you can do all the stuff.
And is it a little bit like taking levels in like D20? Is it that kind of a thing, or?
Um, well, when you take a level in a skill, it's going to jump up 10%
Uh huh.
in its ability, and sometimes, depending on if there's special abilities associated with that skill, those might also be able to be tweaked.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, because it
And if you're
looked
a
very
warrior,
interesting to me when I saw that. I thought that was intriguing.
I find people find it real intuitive, and if they're like, "Oh, I took a new level in Warrior. Oh, I get to pick a new Kung Fu technique,"
Yeah.
you know. And that was one too that you go through several versions of, well, some of these techniques are a little bit better than others, and they should be the apex powers and stuff. But at the end of the day, what we found that players loved the most was being able to learn what they want to learn when they want to learn it,
Hmm.
and it also fits in with wuxia stories. I mean, the heroes do all kinds of stuff and shortcut things and get the techniques and stuff that they need.
It's
So,
it's 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 always it's always a tricky thing because I find like if you shave too much of the rough edges off of the balance issue,
yeah,
you can make it can get dull for the players, because they want that,
right.
and there are different. So like in terms of, I don't know what language to use here, but like power disparity. How much did you allow for that? How much did you try to contain that? Because with wuxia, that seems like something that you sort of make a decision about, and then you just kind of go with whatever you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, by combining the numbers of levels of different skills and how many of them and your attributes scores themselves, your
Hmm.
strength and your willpower and things like that, a measure of all those things together gives you an overall rank.
Hmm.
And the D00 Lite system supports 7 ranks. Now, there's a great big jump between 1 and 2. And there's a big jump between 2 and 3. And yet there's also a lot of room in there. So a level 3 might be more powerful than a rank 4, depending on what they've chosen and what the circumstances
Okay.
are and stuff like that too. So it's softer, it's softer borders.
Hmm.
Um, I've been in talks with the publisher. I think if I'm to do another version of this many years from now, and we'd be looking at something like 10 ranks
Okay.
to have an even larger range. But right now, I mean, rank 1 characters when you start out in the game, uh, for people who play D&D, they're going to feel like a third level character with the stuff they can do. They're going to
Okay.
feel fairly competent, and they can beat up a bunch of bad guys that are mooks, the common table term. And, whereas someone who's rank 4 or 5 can can clean house, you know. Um, so there is quite a range between the characters, as far as and that helps with villains and stuff like that too.
Yeah, no, I think that works great in this kind of a setting. So, and like you said, with villains in particular, um, what about? I'm looking at alchemy right now. What?
Yeah,
How did you approach alchemy? Because that is something that's very different in this kind of a setting, and it. I found that one of the more challenging things when I did it in my own systems. I'm curious
it
how
it
it was
was
for
it was
you.
very challenging. We went through a couple of iterations of that too before we finally pared it down to just a few core concepts that are very gameable.
Mm-hmm.
We It was too easy to make it simulationist.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I say easy, I mean to create lots of charts and additions and costs and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, you're like, well, this is too hard to figure out on the fly. I'm an alchemist. I want to make some healing pills for my team. I
Mm-hmm.
want to make I want to make, like a character like Number 10 Ox. I want to make him even stronger.
Okay.
Stuff like that. So we ended up. It's kind of funny because you know this in developing. You develop, and then sometimes you have to come back around to your design goals and stuff. And I started every single writing session by reading my design goals, and the alchemy ended up tweaking the alchemy types to work a lot like spells, as far as
Okay.
their ease of use, ease of applicability, and uh, the person we found that the people playing the alchemist could figure out right away what they could do and how long it was going to take them to do it. It's not an
Okay.
instant thing. It is something that you want to prepare ahead of time, but it can be an instant thing as far as trying to find an antidote for somebody who just got poisoned, stuff like that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. No. It looks. Again, a lot of this looks really sleek, but this looks very, very well
Thanks.
done.
Well,
Um, Now,
I
what?
won't show you the first versions.
Well, there's always that. There's always. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
that's part of making a game is you got to go. When I first made mine, if I showed people the original material, it would be awful. Do you know what I mean? Just
Uh-huh.
because
Uh-huh.
you gotta make that stuff. Um, are there any parts of the game that you want to specifically talk about, just so we don't lose track of?
Well, I think well, yes, we have a bunch of creatures in there pulled from myth and legends. That's if people want to go that direction. I guess I want to point out that, well, at the beginning, like I was talking about the core concept of this game, I can teach it in like 3 minutes.
Mhm.
But there is a lot there for character development. This supports long-term play. It's an easy game to get into, but there's really a lot of meat there as far as stuff that you can do and change and work with. To that end, there's a lot of tools for the GM too. Uh, Bad guys are not made like characters. All the extra information for characters, that's for
Mm.
players to develop and be able
Okay.
to play with. We don't need those same widgets for the GM, you know. So
So how
for
does the
GM,
GM
we need
make
to
bad guys?
um, well, what you're going to do is decide how tough you want them to be,
Hmm.
and then you're going to look at a chart, and that's going to give you the basics, and then you can easily flesh them out in maybe a minute or two,
Okay.
as far as their abilities and how they're going to stand up to the players. There's three different kinds of enemies, or three basic types of villains, besides creatures, which I don't emphasize in the book, even though there's like almost 60 of them. Uh, I think there's guidance in there for the GM not to use creatures unless there's a really good reason to, because this is wuxia, and you just don't, you don't do it in a more traditional fantasy kind of way. There has to be a reason for the creature to be there, a very good reason, and it has to involve a villain in
Mm.
some way, or a mistake, an oops.
Okay.
Um, but the villains come in three different basic strengths. So there is the basic mook, which your characters can take on hordes. I mean, I have many, many paper minis that I have stacked in containers, and when I start putting them out, and people are like, "Okay, you're at 2 dozen. You can stop now," you know, and I I think it's important, and the book says, the GM should tell the players, obviously these are mooks, because they're going to approach those fights differently.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
there are your standard minor NPCs or villains. These are the ones that have names and the strange, something about them stands out. Maybe they've got that mole with the hair on the side of the face that they're always touching, or they have some kind of mannerism, like they wear nice clothes and set up a fine dinner for the person they're about to fight, but there's only one table setting because it's for the victor, stuff like
Okay.
that. And these guys guys and gals have larger stat blocks, but again, are easy to create. And it's more fun for the GM than anything else because you can focus on what kinds of skills and spells they have and techniques. And that's really the meat of them. And you can scale those to fit what you want in the players. And then you had a question?
Oh no, I was just gonna say that seems a really good way to do it because like Wuxia is one of the things you notice right away if you run a Wuxia campaign is just the number of NPCs that end up appearing magically for just as things
Yes.
happen, and that's actually like even though like in my own system NPC creation was much more laborious, but I ended up using a shorthand system that was sort of similar to not the same, but a similar approach because
Yeah.
just in the battle in the sort of the the crucible of a campaign,
Yeah.
that's what really I
Yeah.
think works the best is that.
Yeah. One gaming season, and I've created 63 bad guys that they've beat up. And it's like, this is killing me. I have to
Yeah.
find a different way. So I did. And then we have master villains.
Which I
They're
was
not
just looking at the master
they're not
villain.
fair at all. Not even close. They're not made to be. These are the ones that are just like from the movies. It's going to take the entire team to face them, and
Mhm.
probably some intelligence work, probably some research, probably facing the villain down, getting humiliated, and
Mhm.
then having to go and find out how to beat this person, you know? Um,
That's a really good way to handle this. And that what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Ravenloft and how they
oh,
used to handle not just the Dark Lords, but a lot of the big bads in the setting, the monsters. That's how they did it. If you faced a vampire in Ravenloft, it wasn't just the Monster Manual vampire. It was a
sure.
unique vampire, and there would always be some key to defeating them that you could find through something like research or investigating their background or something
Right.
like that, and that
And
seems really cool.
well, I also know that it's going to be a kind of a contention point with some players because they want things modeled
Mhm.
fairly between all stuff. And I flat out in the book say they're not fair. They're not made to be. I mean, you watch these movies and they were never fair.
Yeah.
They wipe the floor with all of the heroes until the heroes find that thing, that item, or that knowledge that they need to be able to defeat them. And so the master villains also come with some tiered abilities that they get to pick one, and that kind of defines their uniqueness.
Okay.
And then also there's the counter for it is listed there too, so that the GMs have a ready-made kind of thing.
Okay. And what is there something mechanically that makes them difficult to deal with versus regular characters in
Yeah,
the game?
there's several sliders the GM can use.
Hmm.
One is their skills levels is so high
Hmm.
uh, that they can take quite a few actions. That's bad. They also have a ridiculous number of body points compared to the other characters. That's your health bar, essentially. They have a great big health bar. So,
Okay.
like in a video game, and so it affords well, you remember Lole, uh, um, uh, the white-haired devil, as he just takes blow after blow, and laughs and scoffs at the heroes until it's his turn. Some of
And
the master villains can do that. Yeah.
in one of the movies, it takes 2 generations to even defeat them,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
Hopefully, people. Well, more problem to it. If a group of characters and players and GM want to do that, they could definitely pull that off.
what I gotta say too is I really like the layout of this master villain section that you have.
Oh, good.
You have like first off you have these example NPCs that are I don't know the way that you've they're really concise. So I feel like I could run this very easily live during play. But the art is really nice too. It's like really sharp black and white art, and the characterization is right on target for the genre. Um,
Yeah, Daniel just nailed those, and it's like he took their images right out of my brain. I mean, I supplied him with some pictures of famous characters from Hong Kong movie database. He
Mm.
said he kind of looks like this, but here's the one I want to go. And then he'd kick these pieces of art back and be like, "Wow, you pulled that right out of my brain again."
Yeah, that's
But yeah, wanted to make them so that uh, I want the book to be not just a toolkit for the players and the GM, but also to inspire them. And you see some NPCs, you're like, oh, I each of those short descriptions should give you an idea for an adventure, because that's what they're made for,
yeah.
and or give you ideas for making your own. Ting Bo and Ting B, the Ghost Twins. They're two female martial artist villains who wear all white, and they have twin Dao that they're the type of the curved sword that has the two flat handles. They fit together, so they're fighting with one Dao, and then they both split, and now they're both fighting two-handed.
Okay.
It can
That
be a oh my. And
that's very inventive. That's the kind of stuff that you want to see in a game modeled after Wuxia. And also, yeah, I like in the was last laugh Yulan.
Yeah.
He's kind of got like one of those like Lady Hermit type hats going on.
Yes, yes,
Um,
and if you read her techniques are just vicious. I mean, snipe and try and get the jump on someone and circle around later to see how she did, and if
yeah.
not, just set up the next one. It's like the sniper that just will never ever go away.
And so now, what about the creatures? Because you had mentioned them. Now, they're apparently optional, right? Like, or they're just not emphasized. What was the?
It's there. It's just I think when you're developing adventures, you shouldn't stock a dungeon with them.
Okay,
You
okay,
should think up really good reasons for having the creatures there. And with the sort of the history, mythology, there's reasons for ghosts and demons to be in there. And then you've got some just natural animals for encounters and stuff like that out there.
okay,
But really, the focus should always be on other human adversaries as your main adversary. If there's some demon guarding a tomb, well, someone put him there, and there was
okay.
some reason for it. So yeah, but yeah, there's such a rich, and you've researched this too. There's such a rich history and mythology to pull from, and
And it's challenging too to get the information sometimes because
it is. I've got several mythology books, and you look up the same thing in all of them, and it's different.
yeah,
So
yeah,
so you try and honor the history and mythology that it's coming from, and then you also look for those niches that you haven't filled yet, and apply them.
now you got my favorites, and you got the hopping vampires, which I love. I love. I maybe overuse them, but I'm curious. How did you approach the hopping vampire? What was?
Yeah, I because I kept seeing that hopping vampires were really based on two different things. One was sort of an animated corpse that was being used to move from here to the burial place or whatever, and you had your essentially your morticians with the bells to keep spirits away and bring these corpses where they needed to go. But then you also have the actual supernatural being. So we've got both in here. We've got the hopping vampire that's an animated one, and then we've got the ones that are actually, let's say those Guardian strips of paper didn't quite work.
Okay, so that's the
Yeah,
the hopping
they can make
corpse would be
more.
the
Yeah.
first one, and the hopping vampire is the more menacing
Yes.
option. Okay.
Yep. Yep. So we went with both, and for game masters, you can have a lot of fun with that because the players, once they learn one, they're going to think, okay, well, we got this, we know this, and then you run into one of the intelligent ones. Oh,
Okay.
game changer. Whoa. So
Yeah, I mean it's funny because you see, I mean, it's you say it like it's an afterthought, but this is a pretty deep creature section, so it's
yeah,
there's a lot of options here, and the
yeah,
art. I have to say the art is gorgeous here
it
too.
is. It is. I want to see Daniel's stuff out there even more. He's just terrific. Great professional person to work with, and he just got it. His mandate was we wanted to show a variety of men and women heroes
Hmm.
and men and women villains, and we wanted them to be portrayed respectfully. And it's got to have that wuxia thing, and if you can, make it tell a story. Well, try and find a picture that doesn't say something, that he did. It's I find um, just look at the water ghost on page 123.
Oh yeah, yeah. That is a good
You want to
image.
use it in your game.
No, these are all good. These monster illustrations are fabulous. I quite like them.
Yeah.
And I like the style. I like the darks in these images. It's like pitch. Do you know what I mean? It's just like a uh,
Yeah, we wanted to go with the traditional line work etchings that you'd see in like a wuxia novel,
mhm.
but then he did it with this gradation and these inks, and it just took it to another level.
Yeah. It looks really good. It looks
Yeah,
really good. Um, Now, why don't we get into everybody has a obviously it's a mandatory chapter, the GM chapter, the how to run Wuxia chapter. I'm curious how you
exactly.
approach that because that that's a that's a hard one to do. Uh, it's
Yeah,
you know
it's as important of what you put in there and what you don't.
mm,
You know, uh, a lot of people said, "Well, you don't have anything about face or honor in there." I
mm,
said, "Well, you give me 60 pages and I'll come up with, an education on this thing. But this is
yeah,
hard concepts to get.
yeah,
And so I'm going to go with the ones that we can understand more. And I might not talk about face, but I might talk about embarrassment,
mhm,
and that's going to be listed in like the GM goes through a checklist at the end of the game, not only to help award what we call cultivation points or experience points, um, but also, did someone get mad? Did someone get embarrassed? Is
mhm.
someone inconvenienced? And what lengths are they going to go to take revenge on you or make an issue of it? So it's circumstantial throughout. We started with fame points and things like that, and found out that it was much, much better just to use it circumstantially,
Okay,
you know, because with mechanics, sometimes you can end up with a character that's got a bunch of fame points but doesn't want to be recognized because they've spent
yeah,
their whole life trying not to be. And so we wanted to, again, to put that in the hands of the players and the GMs to do with as they saw fit.
yeah.
But yeah, you got to have your
Oh, go ahead, go ahead. Sorry.
you got to have romance. We've got a thing on romance on how to deal with that, revenge, and then injuries. There are times, rare times in the game where, well, if you're attacked with a critical success, you have to defend with a critical success. And sometimes players have thought it worth it, and sometimes that doesn't work out and they get a crit failure. So when that happens, they get a permanent injury. It's rare, but it can happen. But this section, fully obviously inspired by Crippled Avengers and
Yeah.
and the whole crippled wuxia or kung fu genre, there are ways of overcoming them,
Yes. Yeah.
and it takes some time and some cultivation or experience, and then you're never going to be leaving the game, but you could be disadvantaged for a while and eventually work past that. And I wanted to gamify that so that it could happen and that you could work your way out of it.
Okay. Yeah. That's how I like to approach that. I think that is number one. That's a big part of the genre. The you know like you said, crippled Avengers, one armed swordsman, any
Yeah.
number of others where people even Return to Condor Heroes.
Hmm.
Spoilers. He loses his arm midway through. Which again, that to me, that's something that sort of sets this kind of genre apart. Is that that you would get to that midway through the story is what
Yeah.
really when you're fully invested in the guy having both arms attached. But I like this. I like that. Now is there a mechanical effect initially if my character loses
Yes.
an arm? There's like penalties and that sort of thing?
Yeah. Yeah. We've got it's based on the actual critical failure roll that you rolled at the time you did it.
Okay.
So like you were saying that you lost let's say you had rolled an 88 and lost a one arm or hand.
Hmm.
You just cannot use two-handed weapons, and you've got a subtraction or a penalty to your dex from then
Okay.
on.
Okay.
The balance thing.
And then,
Uh,
but then over time, I can sort of balance that out through
yep, you
hard
can
work.
you can make it so that you've learned how to compensate for your balance and no longer suffer the penalty. And while you still can't do things that require two arms, you can overcome that with, uh, in this case, 4 months training and 8 cultivation
Okay.
points.
Okay. No, that's
So we've
that's
actually built in the way back out of that, and that can be stories too that you do.
okay. Yeah, I like the section that you have here on the crippled Avenger, and it that's pretty well structured. It looks like.
Yeah, it surprisingly didn't take up a lot of room in the game. Once we played with it and got it, it's like,
Hmm.
well, this stuff can happen. I'm sure, it's another one of those things that if a player is like, well, I don't want to play this character anymore, obviously they would work with their GM to create a new character or do whatever.
Hmm.
But if they want to work through it, we've got a method for that.
Okay. By the way,
So
that.
that they
Oh, go ahead. I don't
go,
want to
go.
interrupt you.
I just wanted to say that there's a way that they can go past that and actually, even more jump into the genre, you know.
The picture on 134 encapsulates one of there's just something about that picture.
Yeah,
that,
that was another one that I sent that to Daniel, and I described. I said a couple of adventurers going through a trap-filled hallway,
mhm.
a la Indiana Jones, but much much worse. And yeah, he did
That's
it.
the traps in Wuxia are brutal. Like they some of them are designed to work all the way. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
It's
yes,
so I really like that image.
yeah.
Um, so let's see here. What about uh like I don't know, like was there anything that you specifically avoided when you made this? Like was there something
Um,
you didn't want the game to have that maybe people
well,
thought it should have but you
yeah.
didn't want?
Well, okay. First of all, uh, I want to make this a gateway to this storytelling genre because I just think it's so fantastic.
Hmm.
I also don't want to misrepresent real history
Hmm.
and real religions and things like that. So while yeah, you could equate some of the organizations and some of these philosophies or belief systems to real world ones, they're simplified. They're gamified.
Yeah.
They're made to be used at the gaming table and maybe spark a conversation, but they're not really designed to do more than that. Whereas I wasn't really comfortable with saying, well, here in 2 paragraphs is Taoism. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I wasn't, so I stayed away from that. Um, and while I've got things in there for secret techniques and some people call them hidden weapons. I like to call them weapons of ingenious design and things like that. Face is again just such a huge topic, and I didn't feel that a rules light game and what I was trying to do could do it justice.
Hmm.
So instead, I talk about embarrassment and revenge and
Okay.
that kind of thing. And as far as honor, um, okay, so some scholars you can make the argument that the stories from samurai Japan are wuxia. Um, I I wanted to keep this fully in the Chinese version of the stories,
Hmm.
because I didn't feel that that gets enough attention, and it's so rich and it's different. And if I slapped some rules down for honor, I think it would get used so much like the samurai
Yeah.
stories. You agree? Okay.
Yeah, I agree with
Um,
that. I agree with
yeah.
that.
And it just felt like such a pitfall. And I thought, you know what? Let's instead talk about people's pride. Let's instead talk about family obligation and obligation to society, obligation to your vows that you make along the way, and that will cover it with the same results, and it won't muddy the waters. So those were a couple of things that I steered away from.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Now,
yeah.
what about because you spoke a little bit about some of the campaign elements and stuff, but I'm curious, what is your like? How would you describe your play style? Like, what play
Ooh,
style would and is that informing the game, or is the game broader than your own play style?
yeah. I've in playtesting, I've run several different game styles and campaigns,
Hmm.
to do it. So one of the things that uh, I see is when people make a a niche role-playing game is people like, well, that's pretty cool, but what do I do with it? So I provided some campaign starters, and just based on the names, they'll kind of tell you what they're about there. And I think you were seeing that. But um, so like Lieutenants of the Magistrate, if you want to have a really structured type campaign where the players are being sent on missions and are being told, here, you have this backing. This is what your pay is going to be. This is your authority level. You're going to work your way up the ranks. And by the way, there's a murder mystery or something happened. Go figure it out. And because the players can be the lieutenants of the magistrate, um, they can be players. They can do what they want to do, and then based on how they treat the public and informants and victims and perpetrators, they'll build their reputation, and then the campaign will start to write itself. Um, so I think there's a lot of ways of doing it. So what I did is just wrote down the main kinds of things which you could mix or match. But so along with that, there's the members of the same Kung Fu School, classic material there. Tales of the Strange. We both read the same Fu Songling's book, and
Yeah.
yeah, I just love it that people are using him as a character. What a great idea! I gotta commend you on your work on that. Just great. And then we got to see Jackie Chan play Fu Songling in
Recently, very recently.
recently,
Yeah.
very, yeah. And it's like, wait, he's the author of this. Okay, that's pretty cool,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, and then just straight up treasure hunters, wandering heroes, and wronged by the same villain. And there's actually a little story about wandering heroes. Jia, Jia. I use the term in the book throughout, and in my talks with uh, uh, Albert Dahlia, he's like, it's time. You know, people have samurai, people
Mm.
have gunslinger, they have warlock, they have knight.
Now,
It's
do
time
you
for
use the
Xia.
Chinese or do you use Wandering Heroes as the general?
I used
Or do you use shop?
XIA, Xia,
Okay,
yep,
okay,
and then
okay.
put information in the glossary on the back on what it is and the approximate way how to say it, that kind of
Okay.
thing. And just flat out, just go for it.
Okay.
Sometimes I do say wandering hero, but it's rare, um, uh, pretty
It,
rare.
we've come. It's funny how far we've come from knight errant was
Right,
that was the term. Like I think even when I was working on Ogregate, that in like my introduction, I don't think I used the term wandering hero or anything like that because we didn't want to get too far from that land. But it's moved
right.
so quickly, and I think it's better because it's more like knight errant never really captured
It
what it
didn't, but it
meant.
was, yeah, it's what we had at the time, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's sort of like if that's the term, that's the term. But like you know, when the moment you say knight, you immediately picture somebody in
yep,
armor, and that's the
yep.
problem with that word.
And
Um,
truthfully, every time I saw the term knight errant, I had to go look it up.
mm. Well, yeah,
It
it's
just
it's it's
wasn't something that was
it's a weird term too. Like knight errant doesn't it's an odd phrasing, like uh, like
it is.
so it's doubly confusing for that reason,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I think using Sha is that's a good move because um well,
It
number
was
one, do you define it when it first appears, or you just
I,
straight out
I
use it?
define it and how to say it right when it first appears.
Hmm.
And there's a reminder just a page later, and then it's
Hmm.
also in the glossary in the back. And then
Okay.
otherwise, it's just used throughout as if you know what it is.
Okay.
So
Okay.
in and if you don't, then it's the era of looking things up
Yeah.
online.
That
You know,
that's a realization I had, which was you don't have to describe everything now because people will just Google it, and so provided Google doesn't crash and burn and
yeah.
online searches aren't a thing anymore, you can trust people to actually go look something up if they need to.
I had started writing up every piece of equipment and armor and weapons, and
Mm.
it was like, this is madness. There's so much there, and there's so many variations, and uh, just like the best um, birding books don't use photographs; they use paintings because it's an
Mm.
amalgam of what's there. So when we say gin, it really is a large range of things
Yeah.
that we're talking about. And I had someone recently just say, what would have been nice is to have all this stuff described because I had to go look up what mountain armor is. I said, well, what did you learn? oh my goodness, it was so cool. We don't even know today how they made that stuff. And, and it's like, great, then mission accomplished.
Yeah,
Now, that could sound like I'm being really lazy about this stuff, but this is a rules light game. And again, it's a doorway into this other stuff. And I've got what I think people need, but if they want to know more, I already know it's at their
well,
fingertips.
the other thing too is with this stuff, because it's Excel, like the translation stuff is moving so quickly and all that.
Yeah.
When you write something and you just say, okay, I'm going to do a description of what this is, so a lot of this stuff is on the cusp of being out of date by the time you even put it out, and so sometimes it's better to just say, okay, let people do their own
Yeah,
online
yeah.
search
What
because
happens? What haens if we find a new design of mountain armor and it's not called mountain armor anymore and
yeah,
it's the best out there?
yeah,
It yeah. A buddy of mine was writing his sixth computer textbook recently, and he wanted to put a picture of a tablet on there. I said, don't put a picture of the tech on there. He said, why? I said, because it's going to look old
yeah,
in just
yeah,
a year. It's going to look super ancient. Don't do that.
and
You know,
like with
put
Knight Errant, it's that
yeah.
sort of thing,
It,
um,
again, back to the mountain armor, it's in a category of several heavy armors
mhm.
that that are there. So it's like you can look up a few of these, decide what yours looks like on
Mhm.
you. So if you get that mini that you get made, and printed out, and it's the way you want, that's what it is. You're good to
Okay.
go. Again, I wanted to empower the players at the table to describe the things the way they want.
And is this is out in print now, right? Like I know it's up at
This is
Drive
out
Through,
in
right?
print now. Yeah, we released it in PDF and print all at the same time.
Okay, and they're both available at Drive Through, or is it separate
Yep, they're
locations?
all available at drive-through. There's also you get a map. There's a free adventure,
Hmm.
which is also available in print on demand with a small cost. You can get the map also print on demand with a small cost. And let's see, there's reference documents, form fillable character sheets, the
Hmm.
whole works. Everything is bundled in there. And coming in a week or so, we have some cards that are coming. Um,
Okay. What are the cards going to be?
So we've got condition cards. So let's say your character gets dazed.
Hmm.
The GM can just toss you a dazed card and just set it in front of your character sheet. Tells you
Okay.
exactly what dazed is, what it means, and it's a reminder for the GM when they're looking at the table. They can say, "Oh, that's over now," or "Yep, you're still dazed."
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
and there's many different ways that these conditions can occur, but they're just a nice shorthand. There's initiative cards. You can use dice, that's fine, but the cards are made so that um, well, typically, if you have an initiative score of one or two or three, that's how many dice you're going to roll and then pick the best one.
Okay.
With the cards, you're going to get that many number of cards and then stack them from highest to lowest. So you can just stack them and then put them in front of you. So rotate them to face the game master,
Hmm.
and then the game master can see who's going first. And if there's any ties, they can resolve those and just keep the action moving.
Okay.
And then the newest thing, which is just a huge amount of fun, are these destiny cards. And these, what happens is, let's say your character takes a critical failure. Maybe you've got some chi, maybe you've got some other kind of trick that you could probably shrug it off,
Hmm.
but instead you're like, no, I'm doing well. I'm gonna hit me. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take the crit failure. Well, the GM then flips up the top card and drops it on the table, and it's a destiny card. And these are helpful things that the players can use at any time as long as they spend chi to activate them. And they're all worth just one. And so there's a whole lot of different things like you evade your pursuers, or that fortress you've been trying to sneak into, you're in, and you're in an out of the way corner somewhere. So all that planning you don't need to do. You're there. Um, Mystic weapon. One of your weapons you choose will now magically appear or disappear in your hand when you want. You know,
Okay.
or uh, uh, um, one of my favorites is called Well Actually, and it allows the players to narratively change their current circumstances somewhat. So, like, well, actually, we didn't drink the poisoned tea. We saw the the servant. His hands were shaking, and
Hmm.
we confronted him and found out his family was being held by the master villain. So we just pretended to take the poison.
Okay. Okay. That's.
So these cards stay out there,
Hmm.
and from game to game, if you're running an ongoing campaign, you can just keep them up. Just flip them the other direction on your deck, and each time the game starts, put the ones that were out back out again, and then at some point, when things are going really bad for the players, they're going to have just what they need to help get by. So
Okay.
yeah.
Now what about the setting itself? Because you do provide a setting in the game.
Yes.
It's Longji. Is that, am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yeah, Longji or Longji.
Hmm.
Yeah, the word uh, worked with a few translators on this, but the closest we can get it means several things. It means this is Dragon Place, or here there be dragons.
Okay.
That's the joke, because
Okay.
this is the place off the normal maps that people are used to. Here there be dragons, and so it's a fantasy kung fu setting. Again, kind of thinking uh, like your typical D&D type setting is sort of a mythological, historical amalgamum of stories and stuff like that. That's what this setting is, and
Hmm.
it's based on all the different books and series and my own imagination, and lots and lots and lots of place names named after all of these famous heroes and characters. Did you found
I
some?
saw Lower Lier, and I
Yes.
was
Thank you for getting that.
I thought
It's there for those who get it, you know. And if it's not, that's okay. But I needed to pay homage to all these incredible people
yeah, no,
who,
there seems to be there's a lot of what do they call them now? It's a word for it when they have when there's
like an Easter egg.
Easter egg. Yeah, there seem to be a lot of Easter eggs in the
Yeah, yeah,
namings.
yeah.
Um,
Well, and if you're watching really close when you're reading through the book, you'll know what probably what my favorite film of all time is. But you'll have to dig. And there are I haven't even counted how many references there are to it, but they're hidden, they're subtle, they're not there to make to make you they're not there to play a joke on you. That's just it's the way I think, and they're there.
how, how did you design the world? Like, what was your approach here? Was it
Oh yeah, that was kind of fun. So I think we talked about before my favorite previous career. I did a lot of cartography, and so I had designed just a beautiful world map, and we were about a year away from starting the actual publishing process. And I looked at it one day, and I realized it was complete rubbish because it had the continental masses going along all the borders and like this inner sea and stuff. And I realized, well, how are people going to drop that in their own campaign worlds? You know?
okay?
So so I went back to the drawing board and then redid the outlines of the lands, and then I wanted to combine a lot of potential story areas with the places and the history, and I wanted to make it open enough. It's typical of DWD Studios products to create a broad brushstroke setting, but we wanted to provide enough adventure hooks everywhere that you get ideas to run games there.
Okay.
Yeah, when the final like poster size map came to my place, and my players saw it. They're like, "Can we go here and here and here and
It's
here?"
it's a very nice looking map. And the
And
idea,
if
and
you're
so the idea of making it kind of like it's almost like an island, but the size of a continent. It looks
Well,
like.
there's two very large Chinese symbols there.
Let me see here. My eyes aren't what they used to be, so I might
Okay,
just be.
you you might possibly see a dragon on the right side, and you might possibly see a yin yang on the left side.
Let me see here. Oh, that's what the shape of the island is.
Huh?
Okay, let me see. Well, part of it is I'm looking at the divided thing, so I'm
Oh,
not
sure,
quite
sure.
seeing it.
Yep,
I see the dragon. I see the
yep,
dragon.
yep.
Um, okay, now I see. Yep. Okay.
You got it. Yep,
Yep, I got it
yep.
now.
So yeah, started because I wanted ancient Chinese legends, the world is square, and other kinds of things. I
Mm.
wanted to play with symbology,
Hmm.
and also with the name of the place. Here there be dragons, um,
Okay.
and the mountains of change, um, being along the yin yang divider and stuff. So this is getting into some of my
Okay.
deep
Yeah. Now
design
I'm.
kinds of
Yeah.
things.
That's becoming much more clear. Now, but is it an island so that people can drop it into an existing campaign? Was
Yeah,
that
the
the
idea
idea?
is you got a couple of continents there with their own politics and history and everything going on. I know some GMs are going to have a lot of trouble convincing their players to just start in Wuxia.
Hmm.
Um, uh, but I provided even some rules for if people have been playing in other fantasy settings, or especially like bare bones fantasy. Here's some rules tweaks that you can do to bring your characters here if you want to
Mhm.
test the waters first, see how people like it, stuff like that.
Okay, it's
But I wanted to make it as easy as possible.
it is a
And
very evocative map for
oh,
sure.
thank you, thank you. Uh,
Um,
uh, Used a lot of tricks to try and draw the eye, and lots of places to try and make things interesting, and yet provide brief descriptors without telling you 100% this is what this is. I'm much more
okay.
of the, oh, here's what this is like. And then you can tailor it and tweak it to what you want, or especially if what you need,
Mhm.
you know. Um, like when I talk about factions and stuff, I might mention where some of their headquarters are, but I'm not going to tell you everywhere they are, because you're going to be in some different place in the game world, and you want to be able to use the um, the Wodan, and you want them to have a temple here. Well, then place a temple there. You're free to do that. I'm not going to tell you where those are at, because it whatever I tell you to do isn't going to be right for your game and your gamers.
Yeah,
But I'll give you the tools, and you can plunk them down where you want them to be.
and it looks like you do have a pretty good selection of sex in this setting too. Um, I'm just looking at uh, was it the Sage Mantis sect and
Oh, you
Red
zeroed
Tiger.
in on one of my favorites. I haven't been able to do enough with those yet, but yes, yeah, I've been very intrigued by them.
Now,
I make it sound like I know them and that I hear about them, but that's kind of what happens. You get sucked into the world you've been creating for so long, you just sort of see it, you know?
no, I know exactly how you feel.
Okay.
I know exactly how you feel. Now, how did you go about making the sex? Were you, like, did you were you trying to go after specific things that were in the movies, or were you thinking more in terms of, the world that you were creating?
I started with I started with what I thought players might want to try,
Mm-hmm.
and so I went with iconics.
Mm-hmm.
We need a sect that's all women.
Okay.
We need a
Okay.
sect that combines martial arts and magic.
Mm-hmm.
We need a sect that's much more mystical and much more into the harmonies. So we get those kind of covered. Yeah, okay, we could say, uh, we could find parallels of those in the movies and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
of course. But they're more driven by what the players needed. While I don't stomp on, the sects that have already been created. I probably
Okay.
would have been fine in doing that,
Mm-hmm.
and using them, but since I'm not actually describing ancient China,
Mm-hmm.
then I don't want to really use what people have done,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But players could certainly find inspiration, and then they actually then when they make a Wodan monk and they're doing things, they get to help define what they're like, or the GM does, without being
Okay.
told that's incorrect, you know. And they could then maybe they delve into the Wudang or other Taoist traditions and really dig deep and go, whoa, we can bring a lot to this.
Mm-hmm.
Good, more power to you. That's what I want. But I'm not gonna tell you that's the way you should start. Yeah,
Okay. Okay. That no that well, number one, again, like a lot of the other entries, the thing I like about this is I feel like I could, I wouldn't even have to read this section in order to apply it during a game, because I could just find it while the game is running, and it's only about a paragraph, so
yeah,
it's not too much information that you have to
and
read the whole section right before you play it. You
yeah,
can,
and you already have your threads for creating a campaign, your threads for creating adventures, and you've got your NPCs. So, you're ready to go. That's the idea.
mm.
Um, I mean, it's not quite pick up and go on the fly, but you could if you need to.
Yeah. I guess what I mean is it's like it's most of these entries look like uh, you could use them in the fashion of I need to look this up while I'm running the game. I don't remember what this detail is. It's not going to be, it's not going to be the struggle of
Yeah,
strategically skimming the material to get what you need. You can read the
right.
whole thing really quickly and
Right.
apply
I
it.
didn't want that. Yep. I
Yeah.
didn't want that to happen. I wanted you to be able to grab what you need now and use it and not be wrong,
Mm.
later. Not find
Yeah.
out that you broke
That
your world, or
that's the
uh
problem. That's the big problem that comes
and
up with that.
and it's hard. It's actually, I find it hard like that because I find it easy to write detail.
Mm.
because I can see these people and I can think of their motivations and what they're doing, and I can tell you exactly what they're all about, and I'll be wrong for your game.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
really humbling. It's humbling, I think, to keep reminding yourself, no, that's not the way other people are going to do it, you know. Um, and I'm a firm believer that the best gaming groups uh, organically develop their play style as a group.
Yeah,
You
I think
know,
that's true. I think one of the dangers that happens is you encounter models that function fine online, maybe in other people's groups, and then you try to apply them to your group, and then you realize my group's an individual thing. It's not it doesn't fit this model that I've encountered, and I have
yep.
to adjust to make it work. I've had that happen so many times
and
where
and it'll adjust with your, or you'll have to adjust with your group as someone can't make it or can,
yep.
at any particular time. The dynamics change on the fly too, and um, so based on decades of game mastering, I try to make this as friendly as possible to use. Uh, and I know that's counterintuitive. Give me more information, give me solid details,
Yeah.
but I'll give you the framework, and then you can place it and fit it how it works for you.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good way to do it. That's a good way to do
oh,
it, I think. Um,
yeah,
I have done it both ways, and whenever I've gone too far into the details, I almost always regret it. Do you know what I mean? Because it's just too much material to absorb during play, and that's a uh, you know if you have all day to sit and read something beforehand and memorize it, it's fine. But even like I'll go back to my own books that I should know, and I'm like, why did I make it so long? So
sure, sure.
um, so I
Well, I
think
think back at old gaming days when I was a Forgotten Realms just nut.
mm,
I knew I had all the books. I read everything over and over and over again, and if there was a detail, I knew it and where it was. Well, that's not fun for my game master or other players. Or,
yeah.
I mean, it can be okay if you approach it right, which I would like to look back and think that I did. But you know, uh, it 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 nobody's game is going to follow all that stuff,
What is it? That's what is
and
it?
it's humbling.
Canon
It's just
lawyering,
crushing.
right? That's the
What's that?
is canon lawyering the term for that? The
Yeah, I think so.
yeah.
This is so, and I think I mentioned before, you get too much into that, and life will smack you down real quick, and you realize, oh, I guess that's not going to work.
Yeah, yeah.
So, again, I wanted to create something that you could get ideas from the book. You can watch the movies and the TV shows and get ideas from them, and put them right down your table and keep going. Um,
So yeah, I mean, and I've had you for over an hour, so I'll let you go soon.
this has been a
Um,
lot of fun.
but what what you have the cards coming out. Is there going to be any more material for this? Is this like a one-off thing? Is like how are you looking at this?
Um, I'm working on adventures.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do a series of adventures that start in a small town. The free one is an introduction to both the genre and even introducing game masters to being game masters. We try to really keep the basics there to try and open the door. The next one of that is going to involve a lot of things that were hinted at in the first adventure and are going to be full-on wuxia revenge story, all the works. And then for doing conventions, I think I've got 7 or 8 convention games that I've already done over the years, and I've got another outline of another 5 or 6. Um, so we'll see how it goes. As you know, writing adventures are hard. They take a long
Yeah.
time, and measuring what they do for you and your game is a little bit hard. You know,
How do
there's a
you mean?
demand.
Just
Well, they're a demand. There's. It seems like there's a demand for them, and yet they don't seem to fly off the shelves. Uh,
oh,
and
I
yet
get you.
and
Yeah,
yet they help
yeah.
they help your book because people want to know if it's supported or not. But this is a fully self-contained game. You don't need anything else, and you might
Mm-hmm.
not ever need anything else. But I've got some other stories I want to tell, so I'm going to use the adventures to do that. And they're again based off of a lot of convention games that I've run.
Okay. I mean, the good thing about adventures, I think, is that they can really show people what you mean by the game. Like,
Exactly.
like this is how I envision people running the game or how I ran it, and that could be helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, the adventures are a challenge because everybody kind of conceptualizes adventures differently, and that's always the thing that I
Yeah.
find when you put one out there is that, okay, the trick is, like, I don't know, finding the right structure for your audience. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's the trick. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to try a few adventures and see how those go.
uh,
I have some articles and some other things that I can do. I've got one on fans used in Wuxia,
mhm.
because they're just so cool.
Now, the
But
the articles are going to appear where?
we're not sure yet.
Uh,
They might just be released for free,
okay.
which is likely, to let people play with those a little bit. But the game is really fully contained. It doesn't really need anything else.
Mhm.
We're not going to expand the magic section because the magic is um, it's already there. Everything you need.
Okay.
Um, it's a kind of a broad brushstroke magic section too. The spells are multi-purpose and kind of very strongly thematic. So there's not really a need for more. And I don't see that will. Uh, it's possible that I might publish something in the future on becoming immortal. We've played with rules on that and stuff, taking it to kind of another higher level of things.
Hmm.
But I'm not sure, if there's a real want or need for that at this point. So I think we'll stick with the adventures and see how it goes.
Okay, and so I guess we'll end it here, unless there's something you want to add that I didn't ask
No, I'm
about, or
just thankful for a chance to talk about this game and Wuxia in general with someone I know who appreciates it, and it's a lot of fun. This is a lot of fun.
yeah.
Um,
It-
it's a. I will say this about the game: is every single person that I've introduced it to has had a great time with it. It's again easy to teach, a lot of fun to run, and it will carry a campaign. I know that very well because I've done it, and I have to maybe pseudo apologize to the different people that I would catch at the uh, finding game boards at conventions and say, "Hey, do you like D&D? Yeah. How about if we had Kung Fu? Come here. There's three of you. I've got 3 seats left." And then I sit them down next to the other 2 people and I go get more until I fill my table.
Okay,
But
that's
they,
what you
they
got to
had a good
do.
time.
That's what you got to
You
do,
can
though.
do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But uh, I hope people play it. I hope people play it and then go, "What is this? I
Mm.
want to know more." And then they learn about uh, the storytelling and read some of the books and see the movies and the TV shows and then have their minds kind of blown and bring it to their table.
So, I mean, I would definitely recommend people check this out. Like I said, the book's beautiful. It gets all the right, like all the boxes are checked on this one for me with Wuxia. So I recommend it. And I think, I don't know, I really like the system that you use for this. That it really seems to fit it. Do you know what I mean? It was a
It
smart
clicked.
choice.
It,
Yeah.
it really clicked, and I think the hardest thing was abandoning my first rule set and then
Mm.
abandoning my second rule set. My first rule set I abandoned because it just wasn't quite doing it.
Mm.
The second one was doing it pretty well, and when I approached the publishers, they wanted to do it on their own, and that was six,
Oh,
7 years
okay.
ago. So that hasn't happened yet, and then I moved on with this one, and then this one it was kind of like it was so fortunate, it
Mm.
was so fortunate that we ended up here, and um, yeah, it's a lot of fun. It was made with a lot of love, a lot of respect. Uh, I consulted with you a lot, just trying to make sure that we're treating the genre with a lot of respect, and so that people will get it and like it.
Yeah, and I
Um,
remember that you had very specific questions too. Like there were very, I remember the things that you would send me and you'd ask about, and I get and I think it shows that I mean, and obviously you're a fan going back to the day too, which is I think important here. Because I feel like there's a lot of Shaw Brothers representation
oh yeah,
in this, and
yeah.
which I like. So yeah, so people check it out on Drive-Thru. It's called Art of Wuxia, and it's available in print and in PDF. And hopefully we'll have you back on. Maybe one of these days we'll have you back on for one of the the Wuxia movies or something if you
Awesome.
want to come
I'd
back.
love to.
But you'll see. Maybe we'll have Jim back on. You can hear him then. And until then, we will talk to you later.